Today, we're proud to present the next evolution in Magento performance, Stratus Mass, with all the speed, scalability, and security of a SaaS platform, but specifically for Magento. Eliminate downtime due to traffic surges or code updates. Stratus Mass keeps your store online with proactive maintenance, protects your reputation with malware scanning made for Magento, and is backed by the strongest support team in the industry. We respond to support tickets in 15 minutes or less, day or night. Simple, session-based pricing too. That's Stratus Mass, Magento as a service.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the technical track of Meet Magento New York 2020. I'm Shannon Kelly. I get to be your moderator, and what an incredible honor for this opportunity to introduce our first presenter. Mr. Ben Marks, everyone knows, is the Magento evangelist for Adobe. He's a seasoned community engagement specialist with hundreds of public and online presentations across 6 continents. He uses strategic insight and empathy to understand, inform, and strategically engage both a worldwide ecosystem and the internal stakeholders who serve them. He's a good friend of mine, a great drummer, and an amateur puppy trainer. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Ben Marks. Ben.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I'm really happy to be here with everybody virtually. It's been a year, right? I know we've all been dealing with a lot this year. Some of us more than others. So for everyone that's made some time today for Meet Magento New York, thank you very much. It's been interesting watching all of the memories that have been posted on Twitter. Meet Magento New York is a special place in my heart because it's the community event that came to the U.S. eventually, and I think there are a lot of stories and a lot of fun shared experiences. There's even like a broken bottle of vodka in my hotel room one year that is a story I'll tell some other time, maybe at the after party. But you are all here not to hear about what's come before us, but to take a look at this, this interesting year that we've had so far. And for me, it just kind of starts with the maxim that there are no absolute truths. I might be paraphrasing the Jedi there. I'm not sure, but regardless, context is key, and context is unique, even for people sharing the same experience or circumstance. This doesn't mean that we'll only learn best from those who share a similar background or culture, race, religion, or profession. It just means that how we learn and how we teach must always be evaluated against what we're bringing to the table. So for me, I think of the Latin phrase "nocete ipsum." I think people might know more recently, the phrase just tenet noce, if you are a fan of The Matrix. But nocete ipsum, know thyself. That's what matters, right? That's the thing. Given the Greek origin, I think there's a Delphi joke in there, and I really wish that, as a kind of a lapsed programmer, I wish I were smart enough to make that joke, but I'm not. So given that I promised Marcia and each of you a look at 2020, this may seem like a kind of an odd introduction, but as an educator and and somewhat moderately known soothsayer, I'm just laying the foundation, kind of the rules of engagement, to gain a perspective on a year that can be described as a series of storms with a constantly shifting horizon. I don't know to what degree that's the case for you, dear listener, but for me, 2020 started with a certain set of assumptions. I knew that there was maybe some things changing, but nothing's worked out the way I thought it would this year. And that's quite different from the 5 previous years. I think there's a great thing going around Facebook these days that says one of the rare instances of useful content on Facebook that says, if nothing else, we can all agree that everyone in 2015 got the question wrong, or the answer to the question wrong. What are you going to be doing in 5 years, or where are you going to be in 5 years? Um, so, but I think if we actually, step out of just the volume of change that we're looking at, you can kind of see that the theme for 2020 is actually not unfamiliar, and that it is in fact change. Change is the theme. That's the tweet. That's the TLDR of my presentation. So if you're urgently waiting to go, grab a coffee or tea, or if you're maybe in Australia, a cheeky Friday night beer, feel free to grab it now. That's the Cliff's Note version, everybody. Like, change is here. Change is all over. But I still have a good 18 minutes or so to talk about change. And my experiences are certainly not, I'm no guru, but what I have noticed is the impact of change on our business, the impact of change on a lot of friends. So if I'm proclaiming that 2020 is a year of change, that's kind of a safe thing, right? You might even say that it's an aggressively or insultingly obvious take, and that's not wrong. But why is it even necessary to mention if one of the constants of the universe is change itself? So, I mean, if you even go down for those of you who really got into engineering, and the laws of thermodynamics, or maybe more relevant for some of us, software requirements or project requirements. Change is built in. It's an assumption. I mean, what makes the change of 2020 any different or more significant than in any other year? For me, it is that the changes of 2020 are so thoroughly distributed. They're pervasive across the globe. We as a species, despite being so infinitely and arbitrarily variable as we go from one person to the next, we've had this sort of unifying experience foisted upon all of us. And I think we can more openly engage, with ourselves and with each other from that shared context. Change is such a constant, in fact, that I think we're desensitized to just how adaptive we are. And how often we're faced with change, and how often we handle change in the moment. So we're constantly encountering the unexpected each and every day, and even some of the expectations that we encounter. These are actually changes, but we just have systems and mechanisms for handling them automatically, even if that's just to sort of not acknowledge them at all. So this applies regardless of the frame of reference or the scope of the change that we're encountering, the uncertainty that we're encountering. At the individual level, we have things like the voices in our heads, the emotions that we wake up with, even our health. These are the things that we find ourselves addressing every day. That's the framework, the fabric of our lives, the background. For some people, these things, this background, it remains fairly stable, and that's a function of personal biology. It's a function of resilient behaviors or not, and it's a host of other factors as well. And there's no good or bad there. It's just simply how it is. So for many, these changes, happen arbitrarily. I could wake up in the morning in a bad mood. I tend to not, and that's very lucky for me. But it also means that I'm not, I might not be paying attention just because, things feel good. These arbitrary changes, they could come, day to day. They could come seasonally. They could come after watching a TV show. That could be Rick or Morty. It could be This Is Us, probably the best selling product for Kleenex ever. It could come after a meal, a meal you have with yourself, a meal you have with others. It could come after not eating, if food insecurity is a factor in your life, or if you are looking at food, or you treat food as a coping mechanism or a control mechanism. It could come after a workout. It could come after not working out. The list is as long and varied as is the human condition. So the point is that the physio-emotional state is important because it is both an outcome of and the basis for how we cope with change individually. So I'll get back to that in a second. This is actually the point in a keynote where I'd reach out to the audience and say, hey, do you have any other examples? But my hope is that you're starting to think of the things that you do, and maybe some of the things that you do automatically. Get up, brush your teeth, or maybe even struggle to get up, brush your teeth, do the morning routine. For me, it's simple. I get up. I'm the first one up. I take Millie out. Millie's the puppy. Come in, maybe have coffee, maybe not. But these things that we do automatically, or like the other morning when I got up early because I heard the sound of Millie about to throw up, and that that starts my day off differently. Again, all part of the background, all part of our normal experience. So given that our lives depend on our livelihood, and that our livelihood almost always depends on the interactions that we have with others, just even getting beyond ourselves, we take the complexities of change and change management at the personal level. So all these things I just cited, and we multiply it exponentially by our interactions with others. Because just like each of us individually, the people around us, the spouses, partners, children, pets, roommates, they're all each individuals encountering and handling changes in their own way, reacting differently even to the same inputs. So it's the same TV show, or the same, the loss of a job, the loss of a parent, the fact that the kids are home from school and trying to learn from home while we're trying to work from home. Two people sharing even the same close context, and a lot of the same inputs react differently. It's an important thing to understand. So the home as a frame of reference there, I like that because it's a little bit more controlled in terms of having the same variables apply to two people. But then you shift that over to the office. Now, the office is virtual probably for the majority of the people here. But you shift that, and you shift the frame, and you kind of limit the scope of interaction, right? That's why we have organizations built the way they are. People have set expectations all against a common goal. And that actually helps us in that interaction with each other. We're not everybody doing everything. And anyone who's been part of an organization where everybody's trying to do everything, how well that works. But the complexities, even with that limitation, the framing and the limitations of scope, the complexities are still there. You still have people, each with everything that's going on internally, and then interacting and trying to do something, accomplish a task. It's tough. And I think, again, just like the examples before, maybe you can think of some of the times where you had a coworker not acting the way you expected. And I think one of the ways that we might encounter that kind of change or that kind of uncertainty is to be frustrated. We can kind of save that for later, but it's frustration is a really convenient way to excuse yourself from addressing a change and uncertainty. So then if we step up a whole other level, to the whole organization, or to a community, a state, or a country, and the varying degrees of chaos and uncertainty Certainly, I feel those here in the U.S. Right now that are all on display. But to grasp it, we take these broader contexts, and the only way we can even process it is to filter through the lens of news media, social media, interpersonal discussion. Now, some of these things, they come naturally to us. We tend to, I think, pick the media. We curate the follower lists. We do the things that are more comfortable to us because, we ultimately seek, the balance. We're trying to balance the pressures of uncertainty and the discord. We want to make that orderly. You can even go a little more abstractly and say that industries themselves manifest and engage or fail to engage these uncertainties and change. So things like software design, commerce markets, consumers, all can be frustratingly, arbitrarily, whimsically variable. But for me, successful businesses handle change. And really successful businesses shape the change for their audience, their market, and their employees. And I think that's the crux of it, really. So anyone that left to get coffee, tea, or whatever, they're missing maybe the more important point here. Not that this change is what 2020 is all about, but really how we tackle that change. It has a huge impact in our business. So what about 2020? What about this kind of shared environment of change when you can look in the mirror and know you aren't alone? So I think for me that's a little bit of the magic. If we're gonna put a rosy tint on 2020, you can at least know that when you're standing next to a family member, you're standing next to a colleague, you're standing next to a stranger 6 feet apart, hopefully with a mask, you can reliably assume that they're experiencing change in 2020, just like you. I mean, we actually have that common frame of reference, and that's not too often. And that applies, again, all over. So how do we use that? And that for me is what I want to inspire this morning, is just that is that the answer is to use this opportunity to grok that we've always encountered change and handled it. Like, we're always doing this. We're just now, maybe it's a little more in our face. And now you have an opportunity to meet your handling of change face to face. Maybe knowing that so many other people, practically everyone's going through this, that you feel a little bit more able to engage in the change. And I'd say to find the comfort and the discomfort that comes from turning off autopilot and learning more about how you lead yourself through the changes of each day. So this journey is different for everybody. I can give you my example. I hope it's a good example. I don't think I have any pictures, but I promise it'll be good, and hopefully relatable. It's mine. If nothing else, it's mine. So once upon a time, I was going to be a yoga instructor. Now this is 15 years ago. It was before I met, who eventually became my wife. In fact, I very well might have ended up being a yoga instructor, because I had done all the necessary groundwork, but started into the instructor program, and then I would be a yoga instructor if it weren't for those meddling kids. Actually, no, that's a Scooby-Doo joke. No, it was really just that the studio shut down. And sort of as an aside, the studio shut down because the woman running the studio and her partner, they had kind of gotten into themselves deeper and deeper and deeper, and realized that they wanted a different journey. But that's a different story. So my path into yoga was a tangent. It was really an outcome of a bad relationship, and my point here is that I engaged in change without necessarily meaning to, but it just happened. So I had a bad relationship. I had an unclear career path. I'd gone to college. I'd moved to a different city. It was playing rock and roll. I'd kind of done some startup work, and that's how I got into programming. And but nothing worked out. But I figured, I'm in my 20s, man. I'm in my mid 20s. I should have it all figured out, right? But I guess what attracted me to yoga was the idea that I might get to know myself better. Yoga is interesting in that anyone can do it. Anyone, absolutely anyone who is alive, can do it. Instagram might have you thinking that yoga doesn't count unless you are incredibly lithe, wearing the latest and greatest Lululemon gear, and doing a handstand against a Balinese sunrise over the rice fields of Ubud. But that image, that occidental image of yoga, that's not yoga. Yoga is simply a process. It's a process of actively connecting with and understanding the you that is the outcome, or the me, of your biology and your interaction with the environment. The method of yoga is simple. You use your mind to connect breath and movement. And the power of this kind of active meditation is it's nothing short of transformative, if you're engaging with it honestly. So the hundreds of hours of being present with oneself, it's really impactful. Time alone with yourself is also quite terrifying, at least at the beginning. So if any of you have ever tried meditation, you may recall just how odd it is to step outside of your automatic patterns of thinking and even just observe yourself. So why do I bring up yoga? For me, it's the easier form of meditation to get into, right? It was easier than just sitting there and, with my legs crossed on the floor and just breathing. Yoga it helped me better. And, so as I said before, nocete ipsum, right? Get to know yourself. So my most memorable yoga experience came from my first time doing pigeon pose, which I'm not going to demonstrate. Pigeon pose has you place one leg in front, knee bent and then the other leg behind you with your chest up and out. You use your arms to kind of lower yourself into the pose, and it lights up your quad. So for me, the first time I started crying, not because of pain, but because there was emotional release that I had no idea. So imagine that. I had so much tension passively stored as the result of all of my automatic relation to the world, everything going on. And I just had this tension inside of me. And the moment I did this, and I was unaware of this, I could have been aware, but in the process of doing this, I became acutely aware. And in that single moment, and then afterwards, along with a capable and supportive teacher and studio environment, I eventually worked through a lot of what was troubling me. And that allowed me to start to do some of the real work of getting to know myself and changing my relation to the world. The work, it ended up being one of the things I think that helped kick panic attacks out of my life almost permanently. So my example is for me. That's my path. It's not done. It's never done. It's never done. Yoga, meditation, self-improvement of any kind is a process. It's a journey, never a destination. Though it helps to establish waypoints as a motivation, I think. So I'm going to say that again. Self-improvement of any kind is a process. I don't think that can be said enough. I think if we're goal-oriented, if we think of where we want to be, it's easy to focus on the mountain peak, but then you realize that, you're just going from peak to peak to peak. And you start to realize that it's not only just about getting to the next summit or whatever, however you visualize it, it's about understanding what it takes and how you handle yourself and what you know about yourself as you go from point to point. So what you do or don't do to know yourself is better. It's up to you and the circumstances that you find yourself in. So it's not always ideal to actively engage in change. I want to say this. So if we're going to say that the outcome, like the way that we become better leaders of ourselves and others as a result of 2020 or inspired by 2020, it is it's not always ideal to actively engage in that change. It, as I mentioned before, it can be pretty terrifying getting to know yourself. And so it can be unproductive, at least, and there can even be serious consequences from adding the stress of intentional personal change when your capacity to handle stress is maxed out. And that's probably the case for several of the people listening right now. And probably there are a bunch of people who aren't here today because this was just a bit too much and they had something else to do. Self-care comes first, always. Self-improvement comes after. But you have to realize that you owe it to yourself. I think you owe it to yourself and to the relationships in your life, to the business that you're in, to seek yourself out. And as you start to get to know yourself better, you may also consider gaining insight into your work habits. So if you haven't already, and I think you can do these things together. You pick a system which provides a framework for action and rapid feedback. For example, Pomodoro technique. This is something I've done in the past. GSD. Whatever the framework is, it's something that will have come before you. And you can start with the framework as described. Different systems fit different people, and adapting these systems over time to the particulars of yourself, which will, again, that will change over time. I think that's a sign of an effective process. For me, Pomodoro was interesting because you break your work up into, and it's hard for me to organize my work, but you break it up into discrete bits. And I think the real magic for Pomodoro was that it's not just that you're organizing your work in certain increments and then forcing yourself to relax. You also make little hash marks whenever you get distracted by an email ping or social media ping or the dog coming into the room or the kid coming in or whatever the distraction is. And then you actually have data that you can use later and say, wow, I got distracted so much. And then if you do that over time, you hopefully start to see that either you see that you're not making any improvement in terms of distraction, or you can see that you are becoming distracted less and less. And maybe you expand some of those, working periods as you become more effective. So as you grow more connected with yourself, you can even go beyond and consider counseling, coaching, or some other external person-led change. Counseling helped me tremendously in the past. My other recommendation is to read voraciously and intentionally, not just, I feel like reading right now, but just know that you're going to take time to read. Find newsletters that matter, find books that matter. Get into something that you think that you want to use to evaluate where you are and where you want to be. So whatever your interest, capacity, or ability to affect insight and change for yourself, I want to make one last case for change. This was something that I'd seen. Webb, who he's great to follow on Twitter, has a newsletter, 2 p.m. And this was something I remember from back in March, and then he just recently pointed this out again, was that 51% of the Fortune 500 started in recessionary periods. So basically, times of change, that's when some of the most important businesses, most substantial businesses have evolved. So if we look at 2020 as the time of change, think about if you need something to help you maybe not look at the stress, think about all the opportunity that has to be there in a time of change. I would love to talk about this more with each and every one of you. My time is up, and it is time to move on. So thank you all. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to hearing about your journey just as much as I look forward to continuing my own. Thank you.